If you are completely honest with yourself, you already know this year cannot be lived the same way. Not because you failed, not because you were weak, but because something inside you is tired of running toward things that never truly gave you peace. You have been moving for a long time, thinking, planning, pushing, adjusting, always believing that if you just did a little more, everything would finally settle. But it didn't. And deep down, you know why. It was never a lack of effort. It was direction. You don't need another motivational speech telling you to work harder, wake up earlier, or want it more. You've done that already. What you need is a pause. A real one. Long enough to hear what your mind has been trying to tell you beneath all the noise. Because chasing has a cost. It drains clarity. It weakens presence. It teaches you to live one step ahead of yourself. Never fully here, never fully at peace. This audiobook was not created to hype you up. It was created to stop you before you run in the wrong direction again. To help you step out of urgency and back into alignment. To help you reclaim focus, not by force, but by understanding. To help you build a life that no longer requires constant proving, chasing, or escape. Nothing here will ask you to become someone else. It will ask you to return to yourself. If you can stay still long enough to listen, truly listen, this year will not just pass. It will change direction. And that change begins the moment you stop chasing and finally focus on you. Chapter 1. Chasing trains the mind to live in lack. Chasing rewires the mind to believe that something essential is always missing. Not later, not occasionally, but constantly. When you chase, your brain enters a permanent state of insufficiency. It stops operating from presence and starts operating from pursuit. Every thought becomes future-oriented, every emotion becomes conditional, and every sense of peace is postponed until something external finally arrives. Approval, attention, recognition, results. Each time you chase approval, your nervous system learns dependence. It learns that safety comes from being accepted, not from being grounded. You begin scanning rooms instead of inhabiting them. You measure your worth by reactions instead of values. Slowly, subtly, you teach yourself that your internal state should be negotiated with the outside world. Each time you chase people, your identity shrinks. Not because relationships are wrong, but because pursuit places you beneath what you seek. You begin to abandon your rhythm to match someone else's pace. You suppress your truth to maintain connection. You lose self-definition in exchange for proximity. And each time you chase outcomes, the present moment disappears. You stop living where your body is and start living where your mind imagines relief might exist. Today becomes a sacrifice for a future that never quite arrives. Even success feels thin because it was reached through tension instead of alignment. Chasing feels active, but it is deeply passive. It gives the illusion of effort while quietly surrendering authority. You may be moving, but you are not directing. You may be busy, but you are not building. Your emotional state becomes reactive, rising and falling based on responses you cannot control. You wake up reacting instead of directing. Your mood depends on messages. Your confidence depends on feedback. Your motivation depends on results. You wait instead of build. You hope instead of decide. This is how people remain constantly occupied yet internally empty. They mistake motion for progress and stimulation for meaning. Their days are full, but their lives feel thin. The longer this pattern continues, the louder the mind becomes. Thoughts overlap. Urgency increases. Rest feels uncomfortable. Silence feels threatening. And the louder the mind becomes, the harder it is to hear what actually matters. Intuition gets buried beneath noise. Values get buried beneath urgency. Direction gets buried beneath comparison. At that point, even good opportunities feel stressful, because the system that receives them is already overwhelmed. Nothing stable is built from desperation. Desperation speeds you up, but it weakens your foundation. It pushes you to accept misalignment, tolerate disrespect, and commit to paths that do not honor who you are becoming. What begins as effort ends as exhaustion. This is why chasing never leads to fulfillment. It is not because ambition is wrong. It is because ambition without grounding becomes self-abandonment. The first act of self-respect is not achievement. It is restraint. It is the decision to stop pursuing what does not require pursuit. to stop forcing what does not need force, to stop proving what does not need proof. The moment you stop chasing, the mind begins to rewire itself out of lack and back into presence. And that is where real power quietly begins. Chapter 2: Stillness is where power returns. When you stop chasing, the first thing you meet is stillness. Not peace, not clarity, stillness. For many people, this is the most uncomfortable place to be. The mind has been trained to associate movement with safety and noise with relevance. When that noise disappears, the system panics. Thoughts rush in, old fears resurface. Restlessness tries to pull you back into motion. This is why most people never stay still long enough to become powerful. They mistake stillness for stagnation. They confuse quiet with weakness. They believe that if they slow down, they will fall behind. But stillness is not the absence of motion. It is the absence of waste. When you stop chasing, your energy stops leaking outward. It no longer rushes to prove, to impress, to control outcomes. Instead, it begins to collect. What was scattered starts to consolidate. What was frantic begins to settle. Power does not enter through force. It returns through containment. In stillness, your nervous system resets. Breathing deepens. The body exits survival mode. For the first time in a long while, you are no longer bracing for something to happen. You are present enough to notice what already is. This is where clarity begins. Not as a loud revelation, but as a quiet sorting. Certain desires lose urgency. Certain goals lose importance. What once felt necessary begins to feel optional. What once felt heavy begins to feel negotiable. Stillness reveals what matters by removing what does not. When you are no longer rushing, your intuition becomes audible again. You start sensing when something is aligned and when it is not. Decisions stop feeling chaotic. You are no longer pulled in multiple directions at once. Stillness sharpens perception. You notice how certain environments drain you, how certain conversations leave you restless, how certain ambitions were never truly yours. And just as importantly, you begin to feel where your strength actually lives. Power does not come from speed. It comes from stability. A still person is not easily manipulated. A grounded mind is not easily rushed. A calm presence is not easily shaken. When you are still, you stop broadcasting need. You stop signaling urgency. You stop pushing against life. And in that absence of pressure, the world begins to respond differently to you. People sense your composure before you speak. Opportunities meet you without force. Resistance softens. Stillness creates gravity. It allows you to move with intention instead of impulse, to speak with precision instead of reaction, to choose with discernment instead of fear. This is why true leaders, creators, and builders protect their stillness fiercely. They understand that the quality of their action depends on the depth of their quiet. Stillness is not retreat. It is preparation. It is the space where direction forms before momentum begins. The place where identity stabilizes before expression expands. If you can learn to remain still without becoming anxious, you gain an advantage most people never develop. You become unhurried in a rushed world, unmoved in a reactive world, clear in a noisy world. And from that place, every action carries more weight. Stillness does not make you weaker. It returns you to yourself. And once you are fully with yourself again, power no longer needs to be chased. It is already there, waiting. Chapter 3. Focus is a decision about what deserves your life. Focus is not a productivity technique. It is a declaration. It is the quiet decision that certain things are no longer allowed to consume your life force. Every hour you are given is a portion of your existence, and focus is how you decide where that existence goes. Most people believe focus is about doing more. In reality, focus is about removing what does not deserve you. When your attention is scattered, your identity becomes scattered with it. Your energy fragments, your thoughts compete with one another. Nothing receives enough depth to grow into something meaningful. You may stay busy, but busyness is not evidence of progress. It is often evidence of avoidance. Focus requiert sacrifice. To focus on something meaningful, you must willingly disappoint everything else. You must let certain opportunities pass. You must ignore certain invitations. You must accept that clarity demands exclusion. This is why focus feels uncomfortable at first. It forces you to confront what you are giving up in exchange for depth. It removes the illusion that everything can be done at once. But once focus is established, something stabilizes inside you. Your mind stops racing between options. Your nervous system exits urgency. Decisions become slower but stronger. You no longer ask what feels exciting. You ask what deserves consistency. Focus trains your mind to remain present with difficulty instead of escaping into distraction. It strengthens your ability to stay with a task even when novelty fades. And this is where real progress is born. Anything that compounds requires focus, skill, trust, wealth, character. None of these grow in fragmented attention. They require sustained presence over time. Focus also creates honesty. When you remove distractions, you see your resistance clearly. You see where you hesitate. You see where fear disguises itself as busyness. Focus removes your excuses and replaces them with clarity. This is why people resist it. A focused life leaves no room to hide, but it also leaves no room to feel lost. When you commit your attention deliberately, your days gain structure. Your energy stops leaking into unnecessary worry. You begin to feel aligned rather than overwhelmed. Focus simplifies your inner world. Instead of juggling countless priorities, you move with one clear direction at a time. Instead of reacting to everything, you respond only to what matters. This creates a sense of internal order that most people never experience. And from that order, confidence grows naturally. Not loud confidence, quiet confidence. The kind that does not need validation. The kind that does not rush. Focus also changes how others perceive you. People feel when someone is present. They sense when your attention is not divided. They respect when your yes is rare and your no is firm. Focus gives weight to your presence. In a world addicted to distraction, sustained attention becomes magnetic. Most people will continue scattering their lives across screens, noise, and urgency. That alone creates your advantage. If you can decide clearly and honestly what deserves your life, everything else becomes easier to ignore. Focus does not demand perfection. It demands commitment. And commitment, once chosen, becomes freedom. Because when you know what deserves your life, you stop wasting it. Chapter 4. Most people don't change years, they just age. Time does not transform a person. It only exposes what they were already practicing. Years pass whether growth happens or not. Calendars turn, birthdays arrive, seasons repeat. But for most people, nothing fundamental shifts. They carry the same emotional reactions, the same habits, the same excuses into each new year and wonder why life feels stuck. They do not change. They simply age. This is one of the quiet tragedies of modern life. People mistake movement through time for progress within themselves. They assume experience automatically brings wisdom, but experience without reflection only hardens patterns. If nothing inside you changes, 2026 will not become a turning point. It will become another chapter you later explain away. Most people believe change happens when conditions improve, when they have more time, when pressure eases, when confidence arrives, when motivation feels stronger. But real change rarely feels convenient. It begins when you interrupt yourself, when you notice a pattern you have repeated for years and refuse to repeat it again. When you recognize a behavior that no longer matches who you want to become and choose differently, even if it feels uncomfortable. Growth is not dramatic. It does not announce itself loudly or arrive with certainty. It happens quietly, in moments that feel small at the time, in the choice to pause instead of react, in the decision to act despite doubt, in the willingness to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. Most people avoid these moments because they feel unsettling. They prefer familiar dissatisfaction over unfamiliar growth. So they keep the same routines, the same thinking, the same relationships, and hope time will do the work for them. It never does. Time is neutral. It magnifies what you repeat. If you repeat avoidance, avoidance strengthens. If you repeat discipline, discipline compounds. If you repeat awareness, clarity deepens. This is why two people can live the same number of years and arrive at entirely different lives. One used time deliberately. The other simply passed through it. Aging is automatic. Evolution is intentional. Changing years requires more than goals. It requires identity shifts. It requires deciding what you will no longer tolerate in your own behavior. It requires confronting the stories you tell yourself to stay comfortable. This is uncomfortable work. It removes excuses. It replaces hope with responsibility. But it also gives you something most people never experience: direction. When you change internally, time stops feeling like an enemy. Each year becomes a tool instead of a threat. You stop rushing because you are no longer drifting. 2026 does not need you to do everything differently. It needs you to do one thing differently, consistently enough that it reshapes you. One habit interrupted, one belief questioned, one standard raised. That is how years begin to change you instead of merely pass through you. And once that shift begins, time finally starts working for you instead of against you. Chapter 5. You were never meant to be everywhere. Being everywhere feels responsible at first. You answer every message. You accept every request. You keep every door open, just in case. Over time, what began as availability turns into exhaustion. Your energy thins out. Your attention fractures. You move from one obligation to the next, without ever feeling fully present. You are busy, but rarely fulfilled. Active, but rarely aligned. The problem is not effort. The problem is dispersion. You were never designed to give yourself to everything at once. When you attempt to be everywhere, you dilute the very thing that makes you effective: your presence. Presence requires containment. When you overextend, your values blur. You begin reacting instead of choosing. Your days are shaped by external demands rather than internal direction. Slowly, subtly, your life starts to feel like something that is happening to you instead of something you are building. Most people do not struggle because they lack opportunities. They struggle because they lack boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They decide what enters your life and what does not. Without them, everything enters. And when everything enters, nothing receives the care it deserves. This is why being constantly available weakens authority. It teaches others and yourself that your time has no structure, that your energy is endlessly accessible, that your focus can be interrupted at any moment. Over time, this creates resentment. You begin to feel drained by commitments you agreed to willingly. You feel pulled in directions that no longer match who you are becoming. But instead of adjusting, you push harder, hoping endurance will fix what alignment would solve instantly. It never does. Selective presence is not selfish. It is essential. When you say no with clarity, your yes gains weight. When access to you becomes intentional, your presence becomes valuable. People begin to feel when they have your full attention, and when they do not. This changes everything. Your work improves because it is no longer rushed. Your relationships deepen because they are no longer diluted. Your mind quiets because it is no longer overstimulated. You stop measuring yourself by how much you can handle and start measuring yourself by what you choose to hold. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you do not need to be everywhere to be effective, that your value is not proven by availability, but by depth. When you reduce unnecessary commitments, space appears. And in that space, clarity returns. You see which obligations were distractions, which relationships were habits, which pursuits were never aligned. You do not lose anything essential by stepping back. You recover what matters. You were never meant to live fragmented. You were meant to live directed. And direction begins the moment you stop trying to be everywhere at once. Chapter 6. Discipline fails without identity. Most people misunderstand discipline. They believe discipline is something you apply to yourself when motivation disappears, a kind of pressure you use to force behavior into existence. They treat it like punishment, something heavy and draining that must be endured in order to get results. This is why discipline rarely lasts. Discipline built on force eventually collapses. It requires constant energy, constant resistance, and constant self-negotiation. The moment stress rises or attention slips, the structure breaks. True discipline does not come from effort alone. It comes from identity. Your actions follow who you believe you are. When behavior conflicts with identity, friction appears. When behavior aligns with identity, discipline feels natural. If you see yourself as inconsistent, every attempt at structure feels exhausting. You fight yourself daily. You rely on motivation, willpower, and emotional intensity to carry you forward. And when those fade, so does consistency. But when your identity shifts, behavior changes without force. A person who sees themselves as disciplined does not debate every action. They do not ask how they feel before they act. They move from agreement rather than pressure. Their habits are expressions of who they are, not punishments imposed on who they are not. This is the missing piece most people never address. They try to build habits without redefining self-image. They try to act like someone they have not yet decided to become. And every day, that internal conflict drains energy. Identity removes the argument. Once you decide who you are, discipline becomes a matter of integrity rather than effort. You act not because you are trying to improve, but because deviation feels unnatural. This is why small promises matter so much. Each promise you keep strengthens identity. Each promise you break weakens it. Discipline is built quietly, through repetition, not intensity. You do not become disciplined by doing extraordinary things occasionally. You become disciplined by doing ordinary things consistently. When identity aligns, resistance fades. You no longer negotiate with distractions because they do not fit who you are. You no longer rely on motivation because your actions are no longer emotional. You simply do what matches your self-concept. This creates stability. Discipline rooted in identity survives stress. It survives boredom. It survives lack of inspiration. Because it does not depend on feeling ready. It depends on being aligned. This is also why discipline grows stronger over time. Each aligned action reinforces identity, and each reinforcement makes the next action easier. Momentum builds without force. In 2026, discipline will not come from stricter rules. It will come from clearer self-definition. From deciding, once and for all, what kind of person you are willing to be consistently. Not occasionally, not when it is convenient. Consistently. When identity leads, discipline follows. And when discipline follows identity, it stops feeling heavy. It becomes who you are. Chapter 7. Loneliness is often a sign you are evolving. Loneliness is one of the most misunderstood experiences in growth. Most people treat it as evidence that something has gone wrong. They assume isolation means failure, rejection, or personal deficiency. So, they rush to escape it. They fill their time with noise, conversation, stimulation, and connection that feels familiar but empty. But loneliness is not always loss. Often, it is transition. When you stop chasing, when your priorities change, when your identity begins to shift, your environment must adjust. Not every relationship can survive your evolution. Not every connection can follow you into a deeper chapter of your life. This creates distance. People you once related to easily may begin to feel unfamiliar. Conversations that once flowed now feel repetitive or draining. You may find yourself alone more often, not because you were rejected, but because you no longer resonate at the same frequency. This can feel unsettling. The mind searches for explanations. It wonders if you have become difficult, detached, or disconnected. It questions whether growth is worth the separation it creates. But evolution always creates a temporary void. Before new alignment forms, old alignment must loosen. Before deeper connections appear, shallow ones often fall away. This is not punishment. It is recalibration. Loneliness in this phase is not emptiness. It is space. Space for reflection. Space for self-trust. Space for clarity. In solitude, you begin to hear yourself again. Without constant feedback, your values sharpen. Without external influence, your desires simplify. You start noticing what truly matters, not what is socially reinforced. Loneliness forces honesty. You see which connections were built on habit rather than depth. Which relationships relied on shared distraction rather than shared values. Which interactions existed to fill time rather than build meaning. This awareness can feel heavy, but it is necessary. Growth demands solitude, because identity cannot be reshaped in constant company. You need space to recalibrate your inner world without interference. You need quiet to feel what you actually think, not what you are expected to think. This does not mean isolation should last forever. Loneliness is not a destination. It is a passage. If you respect it rather than resist it, it becomes constructive. It teaches you how to be present with yourself without discomfort. It strengthens emotional independence. It reduces the need for validation. Over time, something shifts. The loneliness becomes lighter. The silence becomes comfortable. You begin to enjoy your own company without urgency. And from that grounded state, new connections form naturally. But these connections are different. They are slower. They are deeper. They are rooted in alignment rather than need. You no longer seek connection to escape yourself. You choose it to share who you have become. This is how loneliness transforms from pain into power. If you are experiencing distance right now, do not rush to close it. Do not fill it prematurely. Let it do its work. Because loneliness, when it appears during growth, is often the sign that you are leaving a version of yourself behind. And that version was never meant to go with you. Chapter 8. Confidence is built through self-trust. Confidence is often misunderstood because it is confused with visibility. People assume confidence belongs to those who speak the loudest, move the fastest, or draw the most attention. But those qualities often hide insecurity rather than reveal confidence. True confidence is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not seek permission or approval. Confidence is built through self-trust. Self-trust is the belief that you will do what you say you will do, even when it is uncomfortable, inconvenient, or unseen. It is not about believing you are exceptional. It is about knowing you are reliable. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, something small but important shifts inside you. Your internal dialogue changes. Doubt softens. Resistance loses its grip. You begin to move through the world with less hesitation, not because fear disappears, but because trust outweighs it. Most people struggle with confidence because they have broken too many small promises to themselves. They set intentions they do not honor. They postpone commitments they know they should keep. Over time, the mind learns not to take itself seriously. This creates hesitation. You second-guess decisions. You look outward for reassurance. You delay action, hoping certainty will appear first. But certainty never comes before action. It comes from action. Self-trust is built incrementally, not through dramatic declarations, but through consistency. Through showing up when no one is watching. Through doing the simple things you agreed to do, especially on days when motivation is low. Confidence grows in these quiet moments. When you act in alignment repeatedly, your identity stabilizes. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop needing external validation to move forward. Your sense of direction becomes internal rather than reactive. This is why confident people appear calm. They are not constantly calculating how they are being perceived. They are not dependent on outcomes to validate their worth. They trust their process, even when results are delayed. Self-trust also changes how you handle uncertainty. Instead of panicking when outcomes are unclear, you remain grounded. You know that even if something does not work out, you will respond with integrity. That knowledge alone reduces fear. Confidence is not the absence of doubt. It is the ability to move despite it. As self-trust deepens, you begin to take responsibility for your actions without self-judgment. Mistakes no longer collapse your self-image. They become information rather than evidence of failure. This creates resilience. You recover faster. You adapt quicker. You continue forward without losing momentum. In 2026, confidence will not come from external recognition. It will come from internal reliability. From becoming someone you can count on. When you trust yourself, you no longer need to prove anything. You act. You adjust. You continue. And that quiet consistency becomes unmistakable confidence. Chapter 9. Comparison is the fastest way to lose yourself. Comparison begins subtly. It does not always arrive as jealousy or resentment. Often, it appears as curiosity. You notice where others are. You observe their progress. You measure timelines. At first, it feels harmless, even motivating. But slowly, comparison shifts your center of gravity. Instead of asking what matters to you, you begin asking where you stand. Instead of listening to your own pace, you react to someone else's momentum. Without realizing it, you hand over authority for your direction. Comparison does not inspire growth. It distorts it. When you compare, you remove yourself from your process and insert yourself into someone else's context. You judge your chapter by someone else's highlight. You rush what requires patience and doubt what requires depth. This creates internal tension. Your intuition says one thing, your comparison says another. Over time, that tension erodes trust in yourself. You begin questioning decisions that were once clear. You hesitate not because the path is wrong, but because someone else appears to be moving faster. Speed becomes confused with success. But progress is not universal, it is personal. Every life unfolds according to different responsibilities, constraints, and callings. When you ignore that reality, comparison becomes self-abandonment. You leave your lane and try to run a race you were never meant to enter. This drains energy. Comparison creates urgency without purpose. It convinces you that you are behind without explaining where you are supposed to go. It pressures you to move faster rather than wiser. The cost is presence. You stop appreciating your growth because it does not match someone else's timeline. You stop honoring your process because it does not look impressive enough. Slowly, your own achievements lose meaning. Comparison also reshapes desire. You begin wanting things not because they align with your values, but because they validate your status. Goals become performative. Success becomes external. Fulfillment becomes conditional. This is how people build lives they cannot enjoy. The mind becomes noisy. Satisfaction becomes temporary. And no matter how much you achieve, something always feels missing because what is missing is alignment. The moment you step out of comparison, something stabilizes. You return to your pace. You return to your priorities. You return to your values. Clarity replaces urgency. Direction replaces anxiety. You begin measuring progress internally instead of externally. This does not make you slower. It makes you accurate. When you stop watching others, you gain the freedom to move deliberately. You can invest deeply rather than broadly. You can commit fully rather than constantly reassess. Comparison fades when purpose strengthens. The more connected you are to your own direction, the less relevant other timelines become. You no longer need to check where others are, because you know where you are going. In 2026, your advantage will not be speed. It will be self-direction. And self-direction begins the moment you stop measuring your life against someone else's. Because the fastest way to lose yourself is comparison. And the fastest way to find yourself is to stop it. Chapter 10. Build a life you don't need to escape from. If you constantly need distraction, your life is asking for attention. Escaping does not always look like running away. Often, it appears as scrolling, overworking, numbing, or filling every quiet moment with stimulation. These habits are not moral failures. They are signals. Signals that something is misaligned. A life that fits does not require constant relief. It may be challenging, but it feels coherent. You can sit with it without urgency. You can exist in it without the constant need to distract yourself from how it feels. Most people do not lack discipline. They lack alignment. When your days are built around values that do not belong to you, fatigue becomes emotional rather than physical. You wake up tired, not because you did too much, but because you did what did not matter. This creates a cycle. Discomfort leads to escape. Escape delays clarity. Delay deepens discomfort. Over time, people confuse exhaustion with effort and numbness with peace. But escape never solves the problem. It only postpones it. Building a life you do not need to escape from requires honesty. It means examining how you spend your time and asking whether it reflects who you are becoming. It means noticing which activities drain you and which quietly restore you. Alignement simplifie life. When your actions match your values, your nervous system relaxes. You stop fighting yourself internally. Even difficult work feels meaningful because it belongs to you. This does not mean removing all discomfort. Growth will always demand effort. But aligned effort strengthens you rather than depletes you. A life worth living does not eliminate struggle. It eliminates unnecessary struggle. When your commitments are intentional, rest becomes restorative rather than avoidant. Stillness feels safe instead of threatening. You no longer need to escape because there is nothing you are trying to avoid. This is when peace begins to appear, not as a permanent feeling, but as a stable baseline. You experience fewer emotional spikes, less anxiety about direction, more confidence in the path you are walking. In 2026, fulfillment will not come from adding more to your life. It will come from removing what does not belong. Distractions will always exist. The difference is whether you use them consciously or compulsively. When your life is built on intention, escape loses its appeal. And when escape is no longer necessary, you gain something rare: presence. Chapter 11. When you stop chasing, you become magnetic. Magnetism is not something you try to create. It is something that appears when desperation disappears. The moment you stop chasing, the signal you send into the world changes. You are no longer pushing, proving, or performing. You are no longer asking life to validate you. And in that absence of force, something subtle but powerful takes place. You settle. Your movements slow. Your words carry more weight. Your presence becomes grounded. People feel this immediately, even if they cannot explain it. Human beings are sensitive to emotional energy. They sense urgency. They sense need. They sense when someone is trying to extract something from them. And they also sense the opposite. When you stop chasing, you stop needing. When you stop needing, you stop pulling. And when you stop pulling, others feel free to move toward you. This is the paradox most people never understand. The more you chase attention, the less you receive. The more you chase approval, the more invisible you become. The more you chase outcomes, the more resistance you encounter. Chasing communicates instability. It tells the world you are incomplete, unsettled, unsure of your own direction. Even success reached through chasing feels tense, because it was earned through pressure rather than presence. But when you stop chasing, your internal state stabilizes. You no longer rush conversations. You no longer over-explain. You no longer seek reassurance through reaction. You speak when there is something to say. You act when action is necessary. You pause without anxiety. This composure creates gravity. People trust calm. They trust those who are not in a hurry to be seen. They respect those who are not dependent on immediate results. They lean toward those who seem rooted rather than restless. Magnetism is simply coherence. It is what happens when your thoughts, values, and actions align. When there is no contradiction between who you are and how you move. When your presence feels whole rather than fragmented. This is why magnetism cannot be faked. It cannot be manufactured through techniques or tactics. It cannot be sustained through image alone. It emerges naturally when your internal world becomes ordered. When you stop chasing, you also stop negotiating your worth. You no longer tolerate misalignment just to stay connected. You choose depth over proximity, quality over quantity. This changes the type of opportunities that find you. Instead of chaos, you attract clarity. Instead of noise, you attract focus. Instead of urgency, you attract stability. Not everything comes faster, but what comes fits better. You no longer attract what reflects your need. You attract what reflects your standards. This is true in work, relationships, and direction. When you stop chasing, you do not disappear. You become visible in a different way. You are noticed not for how hard you push, but for how grounded you stand. In a world addicted to movement, stillness is rare. In a world addicted to noise, silence is powerful. In a world addicted to chasing, restraint is magnetic. This is not withdrawal. This is presence without pursuit. And once you experience this shift, you will never want to chase again. Because magnetism is not about being wanted. It is about being whole. And wholeness draws what belongs to you without force. Chapter 1, 2, 2, 0, 2, 6 is your turning point, if you decide it is. Turning points are rarely loud. They do not arrive with certainty or dramatic emotion. They do not announce themselves with confidence or clarity. Most of the time, they appear as quiet moments of recognition moments when you realize you cannot continue living the same way and still respect yourself. 2026 will not transform you automatically. The calendar will change whether you do or not. Days will pass at the same speed. Challenges will continue. Uncertainty will remain. What determines whether this year becomes different is not circumstance, but decision. A decision held long enough becomes identity. Most people wait for motivation before they change. They wait to feel ready, inspired, or confident. But readiness is not something you discover. It is something you create through commitment. If you enter 2026 carrying the same patterns, the same reactions, and the same excuses, it will become another year you explain away. Not because you failed, but because you never chose differently. Real turning points require ownership. Ownership of your time. Ownership of your focus. Ownership of your standards. This does not mean perfection. It means responsibility. It means recognizing that no one else is coming to rescue your potential. That no external shift will do the work you are avoiding internally. The decision that changes everything is often simple. It is the decision to stop chasing what drains you. The decision to protect your attention. The decision to act in alignment, even when it feels uncomfortable. These decisions feel small in the moment. But repeated daily, they compound into a life that feels intentional rather than reactive. 2026 is not asking you to become someone new overnight. It is asking you to stop betraying the person you already know you could be. Consistency will matter more than intensity this year. Direction will matter more than speed. Integrity will matter more than appearance. You will not always feel certain. Doubt will appear. Old habits will attempt to return. But each time you choose alignment over comfort, the path becomes clearer. Turning points are sustained, not sparked. They are built through ordinary days handled with uncommon awareness, through small promises kept, through boundaries respected, through focus maintained. If you decide that 2026 will be different, then it must show in how you live, in how you spend your mornings, in what you allow to interrupt you, in what you walk away from without guilt. This year will reward clarity. It will reward restraint. It will reward those who stop waiting and start acting with intention. Not aggressively, not desperately, deliberately. And if you stay with this decision quietly, consistently, something undeniable will happen. Your life will begin to feel coherent. Your mind will become calmer. Your direction will strengthen. You will look back not at a dramatic moment, but at a steady shift that changed everything. 2026 does not need you to be fearless. It needs you to be honest. Because the moment you decide to live in alignment, this year becomes your turning point. Not because time changed, but because you did. This is where it ends. And this is where it actually begins. Not with noise, not with urgency, but with a decision that does not need applause. You have heard the truth now. Not the kind that excites you for a moment, but the kind that stays with you when the audio stops and the room goes quiet. The kind that forces you to look at your life honestly. You already know what has been draining you. You already know where your energy has been leaking. You already know what you have been chasing that never truly gave back. Nothing here asked you to become someone else. It asked you to return to yourself, to stop running, to stop proving, to stop waiting for permission. The world will continue to rush. People will continue to chase. Noise will continue to demand your attention. You do not need to join them. From this point forward, your power is not in speed. It is in restraint. It is in focus. It is in alignment. You do not need to announce your change. You do not need to explain it. You do not need to convince anyone. Let your calm do the talking. Let your consistency speak. Let your absence from unnecessary chaos be the message. 2026 will test whether this was just something you listened to, or something you decided to live. And when moments of doubt return, and they will remember this, you are not behind. You are not missing anything. You are not late. You are simply done chasing. And the moment you stop chasing life, life finally starts moving toward you. Close this chapter. Stand still. Focus on you. This is not motivation. This is direction. And direction, once chosen, changes everything.